We've got a great topic for you tonight. My favorite finish of all time, the secret formula of Pugmore, the master craftsman I apprenticed with almost 35 years ago. He was an amazing guy. A lot of you have heard me talk about him, but the first time I saw his work was actually, in other homes before I actually met him. And I always was impressed by the quality of the finish. And I asked him one time, I'm like, so how do you finish that mahogany? It was like I was, waiting to ask this secret question. And he was very forthcoming and explained to me the method. And I remember going home with some pieces of mahogany and thinking, I've got the secret formula. I'm going to try it out. And I reproduced it to some degree back at the shop. But it was only after I ended up working with him for 3 years that I fully immersed in his finishing procedure and got really comfortable with it. So that's what I'm going to unveil to you tonight. And this was actually prompted by Drew, who asked the question, how do you make African mahogany look like genuine mahogany? Because genuine mahogany is not as common today. I mean, when we were building down there at Pugs nearly 40 years ago, it was only like $2 a board foot. And now it's, I guess, at least 12. It's just been harder to come by. They don't harvest and export it out of Brazil anymore, which was the major exporter. So there have been substitutes, and the biggest one is African mahogany, and it's coming from Africa. But I just, having so much experience with genuine mahogany, I don't like African. I don't like the smell of it. I don't like the grainy kind of texture. But you know what? It looks a lot like mahogany if you can finish it with like mahogany. All right, well, the first thing we do is we always prepare the material. And the way I would prepare the material is to sand it. And I'd always sand to 220. 220 is fine enough for most things. Occasionally you might want to go to 320, maybe on end grain, so it resists taking stain. But 220 is enough, people. And then once you've sanded to 220, then I dampen the surface and then let it dry. And by doing that, what's going to happen is you'll create a fuzz on the surface. After it dries, all those little scratched fibers of mahogany on the surface when it was dry, they stand up. And that's called raising the grain. The grain is raising. So the grain raises, and then you come and you lightly sand the board one more time because you want to knock that fuzz off. And then you get a silkier board. Now you want to do that because the finish we'll be applying initially is water-based. And if you waited till after you applied whatever stain or whatever, if it's water-based, you end up getting kind of a messy surface because you'll be sanding stain and taking off grain. So you want to raise the grain first and knock that off. Now the next ingredient, once you've raised the grain, this is the controversial one. Brace yourself. If you're a safety fanatic, I'm sorry. I'm just telling the truth, okay? This is a dangerous application, okay? It is. It's actually a chemical that you put on the mahogany. This is the secret weapon. And it reacts. It reacts with the mahogany. And it darkens it with a chemical reaction stain. So, the three primary stains in woodworking are dye stains, which are like the dyes that they dye your clothes with. If you want to make a dark gray shirt, It goes into a dark gray dye bath and it dyes the material through. So it's a clear liquid dye, okay? Then there's pigmented stains, which are actually very fine grains of dirt. I don't know how else to say it, or earth, crushed, powdered like ash, mixed into a solution that also can color a surface. But the third one is chemical reaction. And a lot of us know the one, ammonia. Ammonia was used for years to react with the tannins in the wood to warm and brown woods, especially white oak, which was very popular in the craftsman period. So they would tent up the room, put all the furniture in there, the chairs, and open up a can of ammonia, very strong ammonia. And that in that tent, it would just get really intense, right? But that ammonia would fume all of the white oak in the room and have a chemical reaction with the tannins in the wood and brown it all so beautifully without ever having to pick up a brush so it's pretty clever not touching it and staining everything in the room. But that can be dangerous too. That's the thing about these chemical reaction stains, they can be dangerous. But all right, I've let you hang in long enough. What is it? All right, this is it. These crystals. I've had this jar for probably 20 years, so you don't use a lot of it in the time. But what it is, if you can look inside, it's potassium dichromate. Potassium dichromate, a known carcinogen.
Oh, great.
But the largest danger of it is breathing the powder or the dust. So when you apply it to any surface, if you're going to sand it off, I always try to have a HEPA vacuum and a very good dust mask, and I don't kick up much dust at all. So that's the main thing. But look, if you're going to try this method, you've been warned, it's dangerous. Please read all of the safety data information and follow that data. It's also been known to cause short-term memory, but that's never been a problem for me. And it's
Can't remember it happening before, huh?
No, and it's also been known to cause short-term memory, but that's never happened to me. All right, so let's apply it. Let's accomplish Pug's famous secret recipe. But here's the mixture. It looks like orange Kool-Aid, a little brownish, but clear looking. And I mixed mine. I mixed it for this example. If you think of 1 teaspoon per quart. So this is 16 ounces. I put half a teaspoon. Now, that's actually stronger than I like to go. I would cut that in half again. So if you actually think half teaspoon per quart, quarter teaspoon, and you'll see why. This isn't bad, but it's pretty deep. Maybe I'd rather apply it twice, but this is a chemical reaction stain. So let's put it on the back of this board first. So you can also, I checked on Amazon. I did a search, potassium dichromate, and it's on Amazon. Crystals. And you can actually get a pound of it for $16. Wow. But then they charge you $19 to ship it. So it ends up, $2 an ounce. That's pretty cheap when you think how long I've had that. But let's check it out.
All right, let's go.
Let's look at the hard reaction right here. So we're just going to wipe it across, and I'll leave a spot. You see how kind of blonde it is? This wood does not have the telltale reddish character of genuine mahogany. This is African mahogany. But watch, fans, right before your very eyes. It's changing color. It's reacting with whatever it is in that wood. This is darkening, but let me just show you the other side. This is after a few minutes when it dries. This is dry. Look how brown that is. but it's also brought out kind of a reddish tint, but it's dry.
Some of the chatoyance on there.
It's
too.
dry, so you really can't tell what's going on. Now, you see how dark that is? That's a little darker than I like. I don't want it quite that dark because if you know mahogany, mahogany darkens on its own. So this already has a dark cast to it. But let's keep going and see if we do like the results, okay? So once this dries, you'll have this. And you may have raised the grain slightly again. And this is where you will actually very lightly sand this with some fine grit paper. And this is where the dust in the air is harmful. So you're gonna wear a good mask, have a vacuum present, and just make sure you just get rid of all the dust, okay? I use the HEPA vac when I'm doing this and have my good mask. Now, I hope I can give you the full experience, but you can see over here, this is drying, and you can see how much darker it is right there along that top line where it's already dried, okay? So it's browning this out. I went faster with that amount. I must have put more on the other side.
Have you ever tried this on walnut or cherry?
Yes, it does not, it's not a thing with walnut, but it can be a thing with cherry. It's just, so cherry is notoriously unpredictable. Okay, so if you had several boards that you thought, oh, these match great, I'll just darken them with dichromate. You might have one go crazy, one not do much, and then you're gonna be mad because you have a mess of mismatched boards. So chemical reaction stains are not for when you're trying to create a beautiful match. They're for deepening a more predictable material. And mahogany is way more agreeable to this process. So I've not done a lot of African, but I've done a lot of genuine, and I do see that it works very nicely. And it's starting to look like genuine already. All right, so let's move to the next phase. Once it's dried like this, the secret recipe of Pugmore was to add orange shellac. Now, you're gonna cut the shellac so it's not so heavy, but down to 1.5 pounds to 2 pound cut. And then we used to spray it on, okay? But I'm going to use a brush for this demonstration. So here we go, we've got a nice surface. Now we'll hit it with orange shellac, and this is going to start bringing up the richness of this finish.
Wow.
Friends, are you excited yet? Are you ready to rush home and try this secret formula?
Oh, it's gorgeous. Do you use vinegar out here? I've got some questions about that.
I do have some vinegar. Occasionally I neutralize things just for fun. No, I neutralize like 2-part bleach, but I don't use vinegar too often. But check that out, huh? That is just with the dichromate. That's what dichromate brings out. And just to show you what no dichromate on the surface looks like with the very same thing I just brushed on, this is no trickery. Look it's like blonde, okay? See, nothing happening. Very blonde. Look at it dripping into that beautiful dichromated surface. That's nice. All right, so that's what I'm talking about. This is what happens. And so, Drew, this is the secret ingredient. Very dangerous. I caution you one more time. Only go with this. Now, I have tried other ways. I have gotten dyes. I've tried brown mahogany dyes. I'm talking regular dye stains. And they all fall short in some way to giving this rich color. It's just special, right? So let me cover this. So this board has been hit with the shellac a little bit ago. So this is 1 coat of shellac. This has 1 coat of shellac, but it's dried for a little while. So now this is the next stage of the finishing process. Now, what Pug used to use on this stage is not exactly what I'm about to show you, but created a very similar effect. We would use paste wood filler very often. and it had a pigment in it. And we would use the kind that had like a walnut, and he would actually mix walnut and mahogany based paste wood filler. At that time, it came from Star Finishing Company. I don't know if they're even in it. I don't think they're in existence anymore. But we used to put the paste wood filler on, and it would affect the look just like I'm about to. Because I'm going to, instead of use a paste wood filler, I'll be using a glazing stain. And I'm using what am I using? I'm using the burnt umber glazing stain from Mohawk, which is a little browner than others. Sometimes burnt umber can be kind of reddish. And that was Pug's little secret too, because mahogany was naturally bent toward the reddish family, where walnut was toward the brown. So when putting on the filler or the glaze, he would add a little brown to the red mahogany, which would kind of give it that. Have you ever seen chestnuts from a real chestnut tree, those spiky balls, and you crack it open and you get that kind of rich red-brown color on the chestnut?
Like a burgundy-ish color.
Yeah, that's what I think of when I think of beautiful mahogany finish. So he was always trying to hit that. So you'd be putting a little brown on the mahogany to give it more that rich color. And when you were putting filler, when we were putting filler on the walnut, we would always add a little more red filler, so a mahogany-based filler, to push it to that same kind of chestnut rich color. So when we were done, the walnuts were quite close to the mahoganies. And I often see that when I look at antique collections of furniture. Sometimes it's very hard to tell the mahogany from the walnut. And just have to trust me on that one if you're not. So let's go ahead and put a little of this glazing stain. This is the burnt umber on our sample board. And this is just right over the shellac. We put our orange shellac coat over the top of the potassium dichromate. So you can see kind of the reddish pigmented surface on there. This is the classic burnt umber finish. And like I said, the Mohawk, I like it a lot because it has more of the browns in it, almost like what Pug would mix up for mahogany. And after that's been on, 5 or 10 minutes, it'll glaze over a little, but it'll still be easy to move off. I guess that's why they call it glazing stain. It leaves almost like a glazed coloration on the surface. Wow. But what it does is it enriches it even more. You get this deeper, richer color.
And you're saying you guys use this on Honduran mahogany too, right?
Yeah, we used it on Honduran specifically. Yeah, we didn't have African. I never heard of African till more recently. But yeah, and it's just spectacular on. But I would go, like I said, lighter on the dichromate. Okay. On the African, it might be okay because of how blonde we started with the African. This is the African just with shellac on it. So you can see how different we're achieving and how great it's getting already. All right. So there's our glazing stain applied over the shellac, which is over the potassium dichromate. And we would let that dry for a little while. And then we would have a board like this. And this one has dried for a little while. And we apply now our top coats. So beginning with shellac again. So I'll put another coat of the cut orange shellac. We'll just brush this on full. And this is going to start showing what the glaze stain did. Let me make sure I got all that off. Okay. So now we brush this out. And it looks similar, but there's a richer kind of appearance that we didn't have with just the dichromate. So if we look back, let's take our sample board. This is one on the right without the glazing stain, just dichromate. Let's put a little more Sorry, I'm going to just do this so we can look apples to apples. While this is wet, let's look at this one. See the difference? It's just a little richer on the left,
Yeah.
right? That's what the glazing stain brings out. This just looks a little duller, not as rich in the mahogany field. So there we go. We've got, now we could just continue with another coat of shellac, and then we would top coat with spray lacquer, or usually a lacquer if we needed it. But a lot of times we would just finish, if it looked like it had enough orange shellac, we would just go to the clear. So rather than keep adding amber, it would get too orange. So I don't know how to describe to you when that is, but this one's probably enough. I would probably shift to clear after this. But I want to show you one more that already has that coat, and it's dried. So we'll get a second coat of shellac over the top of this, and we'll get the full view, okay? So this is, are you getting the glare? No. Okay.
Not bad.
Not seeing one? Okay, so now we'll just get our final coat on there. Very similar, but we're getting a little more rich build and amber quality to it. I'm going to hold it up to that Cuban mahogany ring up over the back of my bench. Now it's going to be lighter because it hasn't deepened, and that's probably got too much glare on it up there. But I just want you to see how it's not that far off.
Wow, that's cool.
Right? And that's Cuban mahogany. And this is African, dull kind of blonde, blah, African mahogany. But with that secret recipe, we've created that beautiful rich finish.